Welcome to our channel. Before we get started, please consider liking and subscribing so we can bring more stories like this to you.
Haven of Hope. The air inside Haven Clinic vibrated with a frenetic energy. Children chased each other around worn plastic chairs, their laughter echoing off the peeling paint. A pregnant woman sat patiently, fanning herself with a tattered magazine, while an elderly man coughed softly, clutching a paper bag filled with his medication. The scent of disinfectant mingled with the sweet aroma of pan dulce, brought in by one of the volunteers. This was Haven, a refuge carved out of a forgotten corner of the city. Elena Ramirez navigated the chaos with practiced ease. Her white coat, perpetually rumpled, billowed behind her as she moved from room to room. Her dark eyes sharp and assessing, she barked instructions in Spanish to a harried-looking nurse, then switched to English to reassure a nervous young mother. Elena was the heart of Haven, its tireless engine. She delivered babies, treated illnesses, and offered a listening ear to anyone who walked through the clinic's doors. Her day had started before dawn, reviewing patient files and trying to decipher the clinic's increasingly dire financial situation. The grant money was drying up, the donations were dwindling, and the constant threat of closure loomed like a dark cloud. Yet, as she looked around at the faces in the waiting room, she knew she couldn't give up. These people depended on Haven. Elena stepped into her small, cluttered office. Stacks of paperwork threatened to topple from every surface. A half-eaten empanada sat on her desk next to an overflowing inbox. She picked up a ringing phone. Haven Clinic, Dr. Ramirez speaking. Elena, it's Maria from the pharmacy. A weary voice crackled through the line. Sofia Vargas's prescription. The insurance rejected it again. Apparently, there's some issue with her paperwork. Elena sighed. Sofia, a single mother expecting her second child, was one of her most vulnerable patients. I'll handle it, Maria. Thanks. She hung up and rubbed her temples, fighting the familiar wave of frustration. The bureaucracy was relentless, designed to grind people down. She grabbed Sofia's file and started to make a call to the insurance company, mentally preparing for a battle. Later that afternoon, Elena found Sofia sitting on a bench outside the clinic, her face etched with worry. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Sofia, what's wrong? Elena asked, sitting beside her. The medicine, doctora, Sofia said, her voice trembling. I don't know what I'm going to do, that I can't afford it without the insurance. Elena placed a comforting hand on Sofia's arm. Don't worry, we'll figure it out, I'll talk to the pharmacy, see if we can get you a discount. And I'll personally call the insurance company again. Sofia looked at Elena, her eyes filled with gratitude. Gracias, doctora. You are always helping us. Elena smiled, but a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She was stretching Haven's resources to the breaking point. How much longer could she keep this up? The clinic sat on the edge of a vibrant, tight-knit neighborhood, a tapestry woven with the threads of different cultures and dreams. The aroma of grilling carne asada drifted from nearby restaurants, mingling with the rhythmic pulse of salsa music spilling from open windows. Children played hopscotch on the sidewalks, their laughter a constant melody. People knew each other, looked out for each other. Haven was more than just a clinic. It was a part of the community's soul. As Elena walked home that evening, the weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her. She passed the brightly colored murals that adorned the buildings, each one a testament to the neighborhood's resilience and spirit. But she also noticed the subtle signs of decay, the boarded-up storefronts, the flickering streetlights, the lingering shadows that hinted at something darker lurking beneath the surface. She quickened her pace, a sense of unease settling over her. She had heard whispers, rumors of a gang moving into the area, preying on the vulnerable. The thought of them targeting Haven, of disrupting the fragile peace she had worked so hard to maintain, filled her with a cold dread. She knew she would do anything to protect her patients, to defend the Haven she had built. But she also knew that she couldn't do it alone. The quiet man. The cracked ceramic warmed his palms, the tepid tea a futile attempt to thaw the deep-seated chill in his marrow. Dusk painted the brick facades across the way in strokes of apricot and fading gilt. Jason remained a still figure at the window, a solitary sentinel in his stark apartment. The place held the barest comforts. A frayed rug, a time-worn armchair, A Spartan bed meticulously made, no personal effects, no reminders, just the essentials for a man attempting to shed a past that clung like a persistent shadow. He sipped, eyes fixed on the street scene. Another day surrendered to twilight, another day sequestered, a phantom in his own existence. The metallic groan of the fire escape beyond the window, the muted thrum of a truck in the distance, were the only sounds breaking his self-imposed exile against his will. His thoughts strayed to visages he desperately tried to bury, the countenances of young men, eyes wide with terror, their lives snuffed out in brutal immediacy, the faces of grieving families. He'd vowed to safeguard, their sorrow a haunting echo of burdens he bore like leaden weights, a constant indictment. He'd been meant to be their bulwark, their protection. He had become something else entirely. He shook his head, striving to dispel the gloom. He'd sought refuge here, craving anonymity, a chance at some semblance of calm that he'd imagined he could inter the past, but it possessed a tenacious grip, resurfacing with unwelcome insistence. His gaze sharpened, focusing on Haven Clinic across the avenue. The modest structure stood as a source of light in a neighborhood often overlooked. He had watched it for weeks, observing the steady flow of women, their expressions etched with anxiety or anticipation. Bulging abdomens, hopeful partners, weary mothers cradling infants, vulnerable souls. He noticed subtle shifts in the locale, the insidious tendrils of something menacing, increased lingering on street corners, furtive glances exchanged, whispers that lingered in the air like a putrid stench. Something was stirring, a premonition he felt deep in his core. A memory flickered. A similar unease, a warning dismissed, culminating in devastation. Not again. He set the mug down, the ceramic clicking softly against the sill. He had to investigate. Leaving the apartment, he cinched a weathered leather jacket tighter. The air held a sharp bite, laced with exhaust fumes and a faint sweetness, perhaps emanating from the bakery down the way. He walked with deliberate steps, senses heightened, studying the faces around him. A young woman struggled with a stroller on the broken pavement. Instinctively, Jason extended a hand. "Need a lift?" His voice, rarely used, was a low rasp. She glanced up, startled. Emerald eyes sized him up swiftly. At a flicker of unease danced across her features before she nodded. "Yes, please. Thank you." He hoisted the stroller with ease, his muscles recalling movements from a former life. Reaching the smoother pavement, she offered a smile, genuine and radiant. "Thanks again. I'm Sarah." He nodded, curt. "Jason." He pivoted to leave. "New around here?" she inquired. He paused. "Just passing through." She observed him intently, her gaze probing. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. Even if it's temporary." He offered no reply, simply turned and continued on his way, the weight of her scrutiny heavy on his shoulders. He was a specter, an apparition. He couldn't afford involvement, he couldn't afford to care. But with each step, he realized, with growing certainty, that he was already caught. The dormant man was awakening. Razor's edge. The radio crackled with static and a voice that sliced through the morning calm like a rusty blade. Further reports of escalating violence attributed to the Razorbacks gang in the Docklands district. Small businesses targeted. Extortion suspected. Police urging residents to remain vigilant. Maria switched it off, the announcer's clipped tones hanging in the air like a bad omen. She glanced at the worried faces of the women in the waiting room of Haven Clinic, their swollen bellies a stark contrast to the pall of fear that was slowly settling over them. Down on Bayside Avenue, the sun beat down on cracked pavement, turning the air thick and heavy. A black sedan, polished to a menacing gleam, idled outside Mr. Kim's grocery store, its tinted windows reflecting the street back in distorted images. Three figures emerged, their movements slow, deliberate, radiating an aura of controlled menace. Leading the way was Viper Morales. He moved with a predatory grace, his tailored suit unable to completely mask the wiry strength beneath his eyes, cold and black as obsidian, scanned the street, dismissing everything with contempt. He paused, flicking a speck of dust from his lapel, before turning his attention to the grocery store. Inside, Mr. Kim was meticulously arranging mangoes, their vibrant colors a small act of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The bell above the door jingled, and he looked up, his smile faltering as he saw the three men. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Viper Morales didn't reply immediately. He strolled through the aisles, picking up a can of peaches, examining it as if it were a priceless artifact, then tossing it back onto the shelf. The clang echoed in the sudden silence. His two companions, hulking figures in leather jackets, positioned themselves on either side of the entrance, effectively blocking the doorway. "Mr. Kim, isn't it?" Viper finally said, his voice a silken threat. "I've heard good things. A pillar of the community, they say." Mr. Kim swallowed hard. I just run my business." Viper chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course you do, and that's commendable. But pillars need support, wouldn't you agree? Especially these days with things getting unstable." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We offer a service, Mr. Kim, protection. For a small fee, of course." Mr. Kim's face was pale. I don't understand." Viper sighed dramatically. "Let me be blunt, we insure nothing unpleasant happens to your store, and no broken windows. No accidents. Just smooth sailing. Think of it as an investment in your future." He produced a small card, its surface embossed with a stylized razor blade. He placed it on the counter. "Give us a call before something regrettable occurs." He turned to leave, his companions flanking him like shadows as they reached the door. Viper paused, looking back at Mr. Kim, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "By the way," he said, his voice barely audible, "I hear your daughter goes to the high school down the street. Such a sweet girl." The statement hung in the air, heavy with unspoken menace. Back at Haven Clinic, the tension was palpable. Maria watched Mrs. Rodriguez, who was due any day, pacing anxiously. The news, like a toxic gas, had seeped into the sanctuary of the clinic. Even Jason, usually a calming presence, seemed more watchful, his gaze constantly scanning the street outside. The Razorbacks were no longer just a distant threat on the radio. They were here, a shadow looming over the fragile hope that Haven Clinic represented. The Razor's Edge had arrived, and everyone knew it. The question was, how much blood would be spilled before it was sheathed? The price of protection. The sun blazed over Haven Clinic, its relentless glare turning the parched lot into a mirage. Elena Ramirez mopped her forehead, the heavy air clinging to her skin like damp fabric. Inside, the aged air conditioner struggled, offering little respite from the oppressive heat. She was already stretched to her limit, balancing patient care, administrative burdens, and the ever-present anxiety about the clinic's survival. The city council's grant approval remained stalled, and the rumors of the Razorbacks' expanding influence were growing more insistent. That a guttural growl shattered the afternoon stillness. 3 obsidian motorcycles materialized at the lot's edge, their polished surfaces flashing with menace. Heat waves rippled off the asphalt beneath their wheels, mimicking the nervous flutter in Elena's gut. The lead biker, a man sculpted from granite, dismounted with deliberate slowness. Victor Viper Morales. Elena recognized him from a newspaper photo, a police blotter image that failed to convey the sheer iciness of his gaze. He drew off his leather gloves, the movement a calculated display of power. Flanking him, 2 muscle-bound figures with shaved heads and vacant expressions stood like silent sentinels across the street. Leaning against the hood of his well-worn pickup, Jason Statham observed the unfolding drama for days. He'd been a silent sentinel, drawn to the palpable vulnerability radiating from the clinic. That he'd witnessed Elena's unwavering dedication. The fine lines around her eyes, a map of her selfless labor. His grip tightened on the wrench in his hand, the cool steel a small anchor against the rising tide of fury within him. Viper Morales ambled toward the clinic, his boots grinding on the loose gravel. "Dr. Ramirez, I presume?" The words rumbled from his throat, a veiled threat barely contained. Elena stood firm, meeting his gaze head-on. "What do you need?" "Protection," Viper stated, his smile a predatory baring of teeth. "Haven Clinic is under our umbrella now. Things can get complicated. For a nominal consideration, we guarantee your safety, the well-being of your staff, your patients." He gestured dismissively at the waiting room. his gaze lingering on a pregnant woman clutching a threadbare teddy bear. Elena's tone sharpened. I run a clinic, not a protection racket. I don't have funds for extortion. She pictured the outdated ultrasound equipment, the persistent leak in the roof, the meager salaries she managed to scrape together. Survival was a constant struggle. Viper chuckled, a sound like sandpaper on bone. Everyone has something of value, doctor. Consider it an investment that I end your continued operation. He closed the distance, invading her personal space. The air crackled with unspoken menace. I invest in healing, Elena countered, refusing to back down. I invest in this community's future. I won't be intimidated. She knew she was treading a perilous path, but the idea of succumbing to these bullies ignited her defiance. They thrived on fear, and she refused to offer it. Viper's eyes narrowed to slits. You misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation, it's an imperative. Disrespecting the Razorbacks carries consequences. Consequences you can scarcely imagine. He nodded to one of his enforcers, who produced a crowbar from beneath his vest. The metallic clang echoed in the charged atmosphere. Jason felt a wave of icy rage wash over him. He anticipated the inevitable progression, the casual cruelty, the calculated display of dominance. He ignited his engine, the powerful roar eclipsing Viper's next pronouncement. We'll be back. Viper hissed, his voice laced with poison. Reflect on this, doctor. Reflect on what you stand to lose. He spat on the ground inches from Elena's feet before turning and swaggering back to his machine. Elena stood motionless, a tremor running through her, as the Razorbacks thundered away, leaving behind a swirling vortex of dust and a palpable sense of impending doom. She registered Jason's truck peeling away from across the street. A brief, shared glance before he vanished around the corner. She stood alone, yet a flicker of resilience sparked within her. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, was watching offered a fragile ember of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. A plea for help. The clinic's buzzing fixtures cast an unsettling pallor, amplifying the fine tremor in Elena Ramirez's grip on her lukewarm coffee. From the doorway, Jason watched, a silent sentinel framed by shadow. The dim light sculpted his face, etching deeper grooves beside his eyes, lending him a grave air. He'd spent days absorbing the clinic's rhythm. The selfless commitment of the staff, the tender hope radiating from expectant mothers. And he'd witnessed the Razorbacks, their swaggering menace, a profanation of the sanctuary. You look ravaged, Jason murmured, his voice a low thrum that barely rippled the stillness. Elena exhaled, the sound weighted with fatigue. Sleep is a currency I'm short on. She sipped the coffee, a grimace fleeting across her face. Stone cold. The Razorbacks pressing you? Jason asked, cutting through the pretense. He'd registered the fear lurking beneath the staff's smiles, the tautness vibrating in the very air. Elena hesitated, her gaze lost in the coffee's inky surface, as though seeking answers in its depths. Finally, her gaze rose to meet Jason's, her brown eyes a blend of defiance and stark need. They're demanding tribute, she stated, her tone leveled of all feeling. And the coffers are bare, Jason observed, a statement disguised as a question. Elena shook her head, a weary gesture. We operate on a shoestring. Our patient base is primarily uninsured, families with next to nothing. Charity and community goodwill keep us afloat. She swept her hand, encompassing the threadbare room, the peeling paint and antiquated furnishings. This venture isn't about profit margins, Jason. It's about fundamental healthcare, about offering these women and their children a real chance. She drifted to the window, gazing out at the murky city lights, a distant constellation of aspiration and despair. I built this place to bridge a chasm, to serve the forgotten. This neighborhood is where I grew up, and I know the desperation of having nowhere to turn. She pivoted, her resolve hardening, a spark of defiance glinting in her eyes. I will not be cowed. I refuse to be forced out. They will not prevail. Jason straightened from the doorframe, his gaze unwavering. He recognized her grit, her unyielding dedication. He was also intimately acquainted with the grim realities of gangs like the Razorbacks. Their callousness, their predilection for violence, were things he understood all too well. He'd witnessed it, lived it. They won't simply vanish, Jason countered, his tone firm. They'll keep tightening the screws, escalating the pressure until you either yield or collapse. Elena's shoulders dipped, her resolve momentarily leaching away. I know, she breathed. I'm at a loss. Her eyes sought his, pleading for something, anything. I've heard whispers about your capabilities. Jason tensed, his body reacting despite his desire to remain still. The past, a relentless tide threatening to drag him under, he devoted years to burying that version of himself, forging a life of quiet obscurity. That's not who I am anymore, he responded, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Elena closed the gap between them, her voice a near whisper. Perhaps not, but you understand their kind, Jason. You understand their reach. And I need someone who does that. I need your help. The appeal hung in the stagnant air, raw and undeniable. Jason glanced away, his jaw locked. He wanted no involvement. He didn't want to unveil his past, to expose his secrets. He was terrified to awaken the monster he had worked so hard to tame. But when his eyes returned to Elena, he saw her unwavering resolve, her palpable fragility, the sheer desperation mirrored in her eyes. He saw the faces of the women he had seen walking through the clinic's doors, the weight of hopes and fears etched on their faces. A surge of fury coursed through him, a primal response to the Razorbacks' blatant exploitation, their utter lack of human empathy. His fists clenched, his arm muscles taut. He pictured his own mother, taken before her time. A casualty of a world that ignored the vulnerable. He inhaled slowly, deliberately. Tell me everything, he said, his voice low and resolute. Every threat, every interaction. The fire flickered back to life in Elena's eyes, a fragile flame of hope igniting within their depths. She nodded, a small, appreciative smile gracing her lips. Thank you, Jason. Failed negotiation. The air hung thick with exhaust fumes and simmering menace outside the Razorbacks' makeshift headquarters. The place was a gutted auto repair shop, its windows boarded with scrap wood, a snarling pit bull chained to a rusted engine hoist. Jason cut the engine of his borrowed pickup, the silence amplifying the rhythmic clang of metal from inside. He adjusted the Glock tucked into his waistband, a cold comfort against the heat rising in his gut. He found Viper leaning against a spray-painted wall. Constellation of crude tattoos snaking across his bare arms. Two hulking figures flanked him, their eyes flat and predatory. Viper flicked ash from a cigarette, his gaze assessing, not welcoming. Statham, Viper drawled, the name a dismissive rasp. Didn't figure you for the diplomatic type. This doesn't have to go any further, Jason said, his voice even, despite the tremor of fury beneath. Leave the clinic alone. There's nothing for you there. Viper chuckled, a dry, mirthless sound. Nothing? You think we're interested in diaper rash and breastfeeding classes? Everything has a price, Statham. Everything is leverage. That clinic is a lifeline for those women, Jason pressed, trying to ignore the tightening in his chest. They can't afford to be caught in the middle of this. Viper stepped closer, the scent of stale beer and cheap cologne assaulting Jason's senses. Sentimentality. A weakness. I thought you were smarter than that. He flicked the cigarette, but at Jason's feet. Elena. She's a pretty thing. I hear she's got a real soft spot for those kids. Makes a man think about options. Jason's hands clenched. He forced himself to breathe, to keep the rage from blinding him. Don't bring her into this. Viper grinned, a flash of gold teeth. Oh, but she's already in it, isn't she? By association. By caring. You see, Statham, you're the one who brought her in. You're the one who made her a target. He paused, letting the words sink in. We want the land. The clinic goes, and those burdens go with it. Or maybe they become assets. Depends on how cooperative you are. Jason's jaw tightened. He could see it now, the glint of pure, unadulterated cruelty in Viper's eyes. This wasn't about negotiation. It was about control, about dominance, about enjoying the fear he instilled. You think you can scare me? Jason asked, his voice dangerously low. Scare you? Viper laughed again, I already have. You're here, aren't you? Trying to reason with a rabid dog. You're wasting your time. He gestured to his two enforcers, who shifted forward menacingly. Maybe you need a little demonstration to understand the stakes. One of the men stepped towards Jason, cracking his knuckles. The sound echoed in the grimy space. I understand the stakes perfectly, Jason said, his gaze unwavering. He knew then that there was no reasoning with Viper, and no compromise. This was going to be a fight, a brutal, bloody fight. Then you understand that you're outmatched, Viper sneered, that this whole little crusade of yours is pointless. Walk away, Statham. Save yourself. And maybe, just maybe, Elena and her little brood will be spared. But cross me again, and I promise you, you'll regret it. You'll regret ever setting foot in this town. Jason met Viper's gaze, his own hardening. The air crackled with unspoken threats. He slowly shook his head. It's not going to happen, Viper. Viper's smile vanished. The temperature in the room plummeted. Then you've made your choice. He snapped his fingers. Show him the door. And make sure he understands the consequences of his decision. The two men surged forward. Jason didn't flinch. The negotiation had failed. Now, the real battle was about to begin, under siege. The rough texture of the plywood grated against Jason's skin as he secured it over the clinic windows. Elena's argument, laced with weariness, hung in the air. This will only escalate their fury, Jason. Intimidation, not invasion, is their aim. He avoided her gaze. Let them seethe. Fear is a far more dangerous weapon. The clinic, typically a sanctuary filled with hushed tones and the rhythmic pulse of the Doppler, felt like a fortress under siege. He had relocated the patients to the back rooms, away from the glass, improvising a triage area in the staff lounge. Sofia Vargas, her pregnancy prominent beneath her worn dress, sat curled into herself, her complexion drained. Elena's attempts at comfort were betrayed by the minute tremors in her hands. He recognized the signs: apprehension, despair, the vacant stare. Of those cornered, he loathed the Razorbacks for etching that look onto Elena's face, on Sofia's, on everyone present. He wrestled Elena's heavy executive desk against the rear exit, jamming it firmly in place. The fire escape was a cul-de-sac, he already knew. This clinic had become a trap, and Viper Morales was the warden. A single gunshot shattered the afternoon quiet, then another, followed by a fusillade. Plywood fibers exploded outwards, the sound reverberating through the confined space. Sofia's scream pierced the air. Down! Jason bellowed, his voice a sharp command against the rising tide of panic. He chanced a quick survey through a narrow gap in the barricade. Three figures clad in Razorback colors peppered the facade with bullets, their faces obscured by bandanas. One of them hurled a gleaming object into the air. A flashbang grenade, he swore under his breath, lunging towards Sofia and Elena, shielding them as the device detonated. The world dissolved into a scorching white glare, and a thunderous boom. Pain lanced through his ears, but he managed to absorb the brunt of the explosion as his vision returned. He saw Elena quaking uncontrollably, her face devoid of color. Sofia whimpered, cradling her stomach. "Are you okay?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. Elena gave a slight, negative movement of her head, but Sofia cried out, her hands digging into her abdomen. "The baby? He's not moving." Ice flooded Jason's veins. He needed to evacuate them, but the Razorbacks maintained their vigil outside. He crept to a side window, reinforced with layers of cardboard and tape, through a sliver of an opening. He observed the Razorbacks advancing, flanking the building. Viper remained unseen, but his malevolent influence was palpable. "Elena, stay with Sofia. Keep her composed." He seized a metal pipe from the cleaning closet, its frigid weight a small comfort in his grip. It was a meager weapon, but all he had. He hunkered down behind the toppled reception desk, using it as a shield. He could hear the Razorbacks taunting them, their voices dripping with malice and expectation. "Elena, come out. We know you're in there. Just hand over what we want and no one gets hurt." Viper's words, relayed through one of his thugs, were a blatant falsehood. Jason knew it. Elena knew it, and the Razorbacks knew they knew. Another shot echoed, striking the front door this time. The weakened would give way further, an undeniable signal of their intent to force entry. He inhaled deeply, the bitter taste of apprehension coating his tongue. He had to stall them. Time for Sophia's baby, time for Elena. Time for the ember of hope still burning within the beleaguered clinic. He waited, his fingers clenching around the pipe, his senses heightened. The Razorbacks were coming, and he would be ready. Desperate measures. The air in the clinic hung thick with the metallic tang of blood. Jason, a whirlwind of controlled fury, slammed a Razorback against a wall, the drywall cracking under the force. Elena Ramirez, her face pale, watched from behind the reception desk, hands pressed to her mouth. Sophia, heavily pregnant, whimpered from a nearby chair, clutching her abdomen. 3 down. 3 more to go. The Razorbacks, emboldened by Viper's orders, had charged in, weapons drawn, demanding protection. Money from Elena. Jason, observing from across the street, had intervened, a silent promise of retribution etched on his face. He dodged a clumsy swing from a hulking brute wielding a tire iron and delivered a swift kick to the man's knee. The Razorback crumpled, howling in pain. Another lunged, knife glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Jason sidestepped the attack and disarmed him with a brutal twist, sending the knife clattering across the linoleum floor that he then used the man's own momentum against him, throwing him headfirst into the overturned medical supply shelf. Suddenly, a chilling voice cut through the chaos. Enough! Viper stood framed in the doorway, a sneer plastered across his face. He held Elena by the hair, a pistol pressed against her temple. Sophia, paralyzed by fear, was clutched in the other hand, her swollen belly a horrifying target. Drop your weapons, Statham, Viper hissed, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Or these two, well, let's just say they'll be making a donation to the clinic's new paint fund. Iron Blood. Jason froze, his muscles coiled tight as he surveyed the scene. The remaining Razorback, bruised and shaken, stood beside Viper. A pathetic excuse for backup. He could take them both, but not before Viper reacted. Elena's life, Sophia's unborn child. The stakes were impossibly high. He slowly lowered his fists, his gaze never leaving Viper's. Smart choice? Viper chuckled, tightening his grip on Elena's hair. Now back away. Slowly. He began to shuffle backwards, dragging the 2 women with him towards the back exit. Jason obeyed, each step a monumental effort. He knew he was playing into Viper's hand, but he couldn't risk their lives. As Viper reached the door, he paused, his eyes narrowing. You know, Statham, I almost feel bad. Almost, but business is business. He shoved Elena and Sophia through the doorway and disappeared after them, leaving Jason standing alone in the wreckage of the clinic. Rage simmered beneath Jason's controlled exterior. He scanned the room, his mind racing. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. He grabbed the fallen knife, testing its weight in his hand. Viper wouldn't be expecting him to come quietly. He had to use that to his advantage. He noticed a discarded blood pressure cuff lying on the floor. An idea sparked. He grabbed it, along with a length of tubing from a broken force stand. Time was running out. He needed to create a diversion, something to throw Viper off balance. He moved to the back of the clinic, peering cautiously out the broken window. Viper was forcing Elena and Sophia into a battered sedan parked in the alley. He was alone, the other Razorback nowhere in sight. This was his chance. Jason moved with silent speed, looping the blood pressure cuff around a metal pipe near the window. He inflated it rapidly, creating a makeshift air cannon. He aimed it towards the sedan's tires. He needed to disable the vehicle, trap them. Taking a deep breath, Jason pulled the release valve. The cuff burst with a loud pop, the force of the air propelling the tubing like a projectile. It struck the tire of the sedan with surprising force, puncturing it. Viper whirled around, his eyes blazing with fury. He shoved Elena into the car and slammed the door, leaving Sophia standing in the alley. Clutching her stomach, he knew he had to move quickly, but the punctured tire hampered their escape. Jason knew he had a precious few seconds. He vaulted out the window, the knife gleaming in his hand. The hunt was on. Redemption's price. The clinic reeked of iron and disinfectant, a sterile shroud over the lingering scent of violence. Jason's gaze locked onto Elena, her face smudged with grime and etched with the same terror that haunted Sofia Vargas's eyes. Sophia, nearing her term, was sprawled on a cot, hands protectively cradling her swollen belly, each breath a shallow, desperate gasp. The Razorbacks had violated this sanctuary. Viper postured between them, a cruel leer twisting his features, the razor's edge of a scavenged scalpel kissed Elena's throat, reflecting the harsh glare of emergency lighting. Well, Statham. Fashionably late, as always. His voice, a low rasp, dripped with malicious delight. Jason's focus remained unwavering, fixed on Elena. Are you all right? A near imperceptible tremor shook her head, her eyes a silent plea for caution. Careful now, doctor. Viper sneered, the scalpel pressing deeper that a crimson bead blossomed on her skin. Wouldn't want to damage the merchandise, would we? Or maybe I would. Makes no difference to me. Jason advanced with measured steps, every nerve thrumming. Let her go, Viper. This doesn't have to go any further. Viper's gaze sharpened to a malevolent point. Go further, Statham. This is my dominion now that my writ. And the only epilogue to this story is you and your precious do-gooders turned to dust beneath my boots. He tightened his grip on Elena. I'm going to savor watching you watch her crumble. Words were futile. Viper ran on fear and power that he needed to be neutralized. Instantly, Jason feigned a move left, then exploded to the right, a tightly coiled spring unleashing. Taken off guard, Viper stumbled, his hold on Elena faltering. Jason seized the advantage, his foot lashing out, connecting with Viper's wrist. The scalpel spun away, a silver flash against the grimy linoleum. Elena cried out, staggering back into Jason's waiting arms that he eased her gently aside, his eyes hardening as he faced Viper. A guttural roar ripped from Viper's throat, the raw sound of thwarted rage. He surged forward, throwing a clumsy punch. Jason slipped beneath the blow, retaliating with a flurry of calculated strikes to Viper's ribs. Viper grunted, winded, yet pressed on, driven by savage fury. Their battle became a grim dance of opposites. Viper, a whirlwind of unchecked aggression, flailed wildly, each strike laden with venom. Jason, a study in composure, moved with honed precision, deflecting, redirecting, countering with deadly efficiency. He recalled whispered tales of his mother's unwavering strength, the equilibrium of tenderness and resolve that kept their family safe. That same fortitude surged through him now. The skirmish surged into the reception area, scattering furniture and medical supplies. Sophia whimpered, her eyes wide with burgeoning panic. The reckoning needed to be swift. Evading a clumsy kick, he seized Viper's ankle, sweeping his legs from under him. Viper slammed to the floor with a jarring crash. Jason was on him instantly, his knee a vice on Viper's chest. Viper writhed, his face a mask of pain and fury. You can't win, Statham. The Razorbacks are legion. Jason stared down, his expression an unreadable ledger of conflicting emotions. The incandescent rage threatened to consume him. The urge to end it all here, now, a siren's call. But the memory of Elena's imploring gaze, the echo of Sophia's cries, held him back. He wouldn't succumb to Viper's poison. Releasing him, Jason rose slowly. It concludes here. He hauled Viper outside, leaving him for the approaching authorities, their sirens slicing through the night as the police cuffed Viper. Dragging him away, Jason turned back to the clinic. The following days dissolved into a frenetic blur. The community coalesced around Haven Clinic, donating time, resources, and goodwill to resurrected volunteers. Purged the bloodstains, repaired the shattered windows, and restocked depleted shelves. Elena, despite her ordeal, labored tirelessly alongside them, her spirit unbroken. Sophia Vargas delivered a robust baby boy, a beacon of hope amidst the wreckage. Jason gravitated to the effort, lending his strength to the arduous tasks, clearing debris, and standing watch through the night. He was no longer a mere transient. A stranger passing through, he was connected, invested in something greater. As twilight painted the sky in fiery hues, Elena found Jason on the clinic's porch, watching children frolic in the resurrected garden. She settled beside him, a soft smile gracing her lips. Thank you, Jason, she whispered, for everything. He shrugged, ill at ease with gratitude. They needed assistance. Anyone would have helped. Elena demurred. Not everyone would risk their life for us. You restored our faith. Jason surveyed the clinic, the community rebuilding, the children at play. He grasped that he had found something profound here, something he had sought unconsciously, a sense of belonging. Perhaps, he offered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Perhaps I needed you just as much. The true price of absolution, he understood, wasn't merely suffering or sacrifice. It was connection.